Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am so delighted to introduce today's guest, Sara Murray. Sara is an advisor, consultant, and speaker specializing in working with leaders and sales teams to unlock the untapped potential in their prospecting and business development efforts. With a focus on construction, real estate, design, and technology industries, Sara empowers professionals to enhance their communication skills, approach prospecting with creativity, and effectively address business needs rather than simply push products. As the host of the popular podcast, Prospecting on Purpose, Sara provides a valuable platform for discussions on prospecting, sales, business strategies, and mindset. Each week, she delivers engaging episodes featuring world-class thought leaders and shares her own insights and experiences. Through this podcast, Sara aims to help her audience connect with clients, communicate with confidence, and ultimately close deals. Please join me in welcoming Sara Murray. Welcome, Sara.
Thank you, Tammy. I'm so excited to be on the show today.
I am really happy to have you, and thank you for joining us from your home office in Los Angeles. So, as you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we love to begin at the beginning and talk about the formative years and how they got you to where you are and all of those things. So take us back to some of those early days and tell us who was young Sara?
Well, I have really appreciated this exercise, Tammy, because being more and more familiar with your work, it is funny to look back and reflect on all of those major milestones, whether that was a person or an experience or just circumstance. And I have learned a lot doing this exercise. So I would almost implore any listener to do it too, and really think back to the beginning. And I was chatting with my mom and dad about this interview because I knew you were going to ask this question. And my parents are both from Los Angeles. All of my extended family is from LA. My parent, any big city has neighborhoods that are tricky. And so when my parents were growing up, they didn't want to raise their kids in the same kind of school environment that they went through. So they were, young married couple. My mom was working for Delta Airlines. They ended up relocating to Utah because Delta has a large hub in Salt Lake City. And then they built a house in Park City, Utah, which is about 40 minutes away from the airport up in the mountains. It's now a very bougie ski town, but 40 years ago, it was not. And so I grew up in Park City, but I was very fortunate enough to have parents that were from LA and that worked for the airlines. And so because of that, we were able to fly for free as a family. And so from flying without a reservation, if you're not familiar, you don't get to sit together. You always sit by yourself. And so from a very young age, I was sitting by myself next to, adults on the airplane. And I think back to when the kind of the sales bug or the networking bug got me. And I know it was just being a kid on airplanes, just chit-chatting with my seatmates next to me. And I had enough emotional intelligence to not ask this right out the gate, but I learned, if they weren't going to eat their bag of chips, I just asked, hey, are you going to eat those chips? And that always started the conversation. And so it's kind of funny, but I can really, truly talk to anyone. And I really reflect back. And I think it's because we never got to sit together as a family on the plane.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's great. So both parents worked for the airlines. I didn't realize that.
Just my mom. So
just your mom.
But my parents both worked full-time jobs. They traveled a lot for work. They were literally we were all alone in the mountains. And so it was I think it established a lot of independence for my brother and I, because we'd have to wake ourselves up early, befriend the other kids in the neighborhood so we could sit in their cars and wait for the bus. So it was a nice, I'm so grateful to be raised in a small town, but have the ability to come back to California a lot. When I was done with college, my grandparents both had surgeries. So my grandpa had an eye surgery. He had to be face down for 4 months. He had a detached retina. So the way that they fix that is putting gas behind the eye, but you have to use gravity to help you. So for 4 months, he was face down. And then at the same time, they have a special chair you sit in, and he has a mirror so he could watch TV.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, my grandma had back surgery and she couldn't move. So like both grandparents needed help, but they didn't need any type of independent or assisted living. They just needed some help recovering from their surgeries. That happened after I was done with college, and the whole family kind of temporarily relocated to LA to help. I kind of looked at this as like a free way to try to move to California. And then I got, the job and the car and the apartment, and I've been here for the past 14 years. So,
wow. What an interesting way to find yourself relocating.
and I had no friends. So at age 23, I'm hanging out with my grandparents and all the widows and widowers in their neighborhood.
But you were already so conditioned from probably all those family trips, right? And sitting on planes probably next to all kinds of adults and business people and everything.
It was great. I think about when I started my first role, especially in networking, and I know you're big on building your network. I think that we forget that we have value to add to any conversation, and the ability, I would sit next to CEOs and I'm a kid, and I'm able to have a conversation and learn from them, but also add value, add perspective. And I think that at a really young age, I learned that anyone can add value to a conversation.
I love that.
And it eliminated a lot of fear when I got into the workforce and I needed to influence people to work with me or buy my products. So it was, I think that was a really formative piece, is the ability to be in a room where you're talking to strangers.
Yeah. And wow, that eliminated a whole layer and level of, kind of the negative self-talk that I think many of us have had, where we're hesitant to say certain things to people or whatever that is. I mean, I don't mean that we're all like that, but I think it's a natural thing that many of us, we worry that somebody's going to take something a certain way. And it sounds like you had this opportunity on a regular basis to kind of have no filters and yet really learn to engage in a certain way and in a certain setting too. I think it's an interesting way to engage with people when you kind of have a captive audience on a plane, right?
And you don't have to. I mean, I think one of the other things when, you always hear people say, I don't want to talk to anyone on a plane. It's like, well, you don't have to marry this person. You could just ask a little quick icebreaker and then put your headphones on. It doesn't, you can kind of go with the flow. You're not forced into a conversation. You can end it if it's are you going to eat that bag of chips? and it was always a win-win, because I'd either get a second bag of chips or at least it opened the door and then we could chat. So I think that especially in a sales role, because predominantly most of my career has been in sales roles, a lot of it is just asking for the meeting, asking for the order, asking for the introduction. And the more you ask, the more comfortable you get at asking. And it's not weird. I think that people have this block that they're worried it's going to be awkward or weird. And once you do it enough and you realize it's not, it becomes really easy.
So, yeah. And I'm sure that you've had people when you ask them and they say no, or you've had to deal with rejection too, right?
And nothing bad would happen. I would get it. Like, okay, you just weren't done with your meal. You eat your chips and let's still chit chat. It was fine. Nothing bad ever happened if it was a no. So I think that's a great point. The reframing rejection, at the end of the day, I would say this in prospecting too. It's I'm asking someone to lunch. If they don't write back to me, I just asked them for lunch. Like I'm not asking them for their kidney. Like I'm just inviting them to lunch. So I think like we need to kind of remove some of this fear of trying to connect with people, because there's a lot of really ways to do it.
Well, and also, even if somebody doesn't answer you, I find this happens a lot with my clients, where they'll reach out to someone, they're feeling a little vulnerable already because they're hoping that this person will invite them for an interview or help them out with a job search or something. But at the same time, they start to interpret what the silence means or what a no means, and they take it very personally. And they're already feeling a little vulnerable and raw. So I understand why it just doesn't feel good. And that's that yucky feeling from rejection or perceived rejection, right? And I love the way you frame that. You're saying like nothing bad happened, just maybe nothing happened, right? And for people to learn to kind of reframe that could save them a whole lot of grief and also open them up to a lot more opportunities, because they wouldn't be so hesitant to just ask for things. It's certainly not going to hurt them to ask. I always say, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. Yeah. So you found your way to LA via your grandparents' health issues. and then ended up finding employment and starting your life there. It sounds like. What was your first job out of school?
So my first job in Los Angeles, I was employed when I worked in Utah. I went to the University of Utah. So that was an excellent piece. I'm really proud of how I handled that, because I graduated in 2008 and tough hiring time. However, because I worked at an electrical engineering office, I just called. I knew a friend who worked at an architecture firm, and she would build marketing brochures and presentations for the architects' pitches. So I just started calling architects and engineers and asking them if they needed someone to do the same. So I went to school Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I worked at the engineering office. And so when I quit that job, I had a nice little portfolio of work. I would build our holiday cards. I would build our brochures. I had enough, kind of stuff to fill a resume and bring to my first interview in Los Angeles. So my first role I've been in construction for my whole career, but on the manufacturing side. So I worked for this company called Atlas Homewares, and they made decorative hardware like knobs and pulls. And I was our marketing manager for a couple of years. So I built out our catalogs. I built our point of purchase displays. And at that job is really where I stepped into like that. There was a big pivot point, and it's such a great story. Yeah. I went to a trade show. So it's a really small, some of these smaller shows where it's a 10-foot by 10-foot booth, and you get a table and 2 chairs and people bring brochures. I had a mentor, the sales director at the time. I was our marketing person. She was our sales director. We brought, go big or go home. We brought all of our displays. We cleared the table out. We moved the table and chairs. Like we forced people to stand in the booth and like come in and touch everything. It was a lot more work than just setting up brochures on a table. But at that show, she had laryngitis and she could not talk. And so I ended up having to do all of the pitches, and I'd meet people. They were preset appointments. I'd meet people. I'd ask about their business. Who's your customer? What style of homes do you work on? And then I would say, well, based on everything you've told me, I think this would be the best fit for your business, XYZ. Like we weren't talking about product. It was all business needs. And we opened so many accounts. It was like a machine. I'd close the deal. I'd send it down to Patty. She'd write all the paperwork because she didn't have her voice. And so at the end of that trade show, I had a customer, man and a woman. They owned a small showroom in Denver. I think they were based in Colorado. And the man, he thanked me. He's like, Sara, we just want to thank you so much. I said, what are you talking about? Like, I need to thank you. You're the customer. You just bought from me. And he turned my shoulders and he goes, look at everyone else in this room. And I look around and it was all, very respectfully, like mid-40s men sitting at a table with their brochures, like no energy, And we had so much energy and we were asking questions about their business. It wasn't just product pitches. And I think that was some of the first little sparks in my brain of, okay, I am a little bit different in how I approach these situations. And then I've just been cultivating some of those skill sets ever since.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it does sound like you have a natural proclivity for engaging people and understanding their needs and not just trying to push whatever it is you have to give them, but getting them engaged with you. And then they get curious enough to want to hear what you have to say, it sounds like.
Yeah, I really focus on the relationship side of sales. And this is something that I've really finessed over the past 15 years. And it's a big chunk of what I'm doing now with my business. But when I look at my personal sales success, it's always stemmed from the relationship. And if you have a relationship established, then the business activity becomes seamless. Because why wouldn't that person work with you? You have this established relationship. And I think so many people skip that part and go straight to trying to push their product, push their widget, but they're pushing from like an empty bank account is sort of what I call that. You have to kind of put deposits in the person's bank account by building the relationship before you can start to ask for stuff.
So, when I think about what we were talking about a few minutes ago, thinking about, how do you deal with rejection or someone not calling you back, and yet it's so relationship based. I could see where when you're, really getting, a relationship going, let's say you've had a relationship with someone once in a while and they do stop calling, which I'm sure has happened. How do you not take that personally?
I think about one thing that has really helped me with my own kind of personal worth and my own ego management, for maybe a better word, is I really like to look at things from my perspective and then the other person's perspective. And then almost like, I don't want to say the perspective of like God, but almost like an objective third party that has no skin in the game. Right. And I have found that if I can break down, okay, this is my view of reality of this situation, the other person's view could be something totally different. And I think the older we get, the more we realize that everyone is dealing with stuff in their personal lives. You have no clue what the other person's dealing with. You have no clue the circumstance why they're not reaching, back to you. And I just have started to look at reasons why I haven't responded to people, and it has nothing to do with that individual. Its circumstances totally separate from that. So I just try to remind myself that it's not necessarily about me. It's about what the other person may be dealing with that I don't see. And that helps me separate, my own personal worth from the disconnect there.
Yeah. I appreciate that so much. I find when when somebody hasn't responded to me, or, in a repetitive way, like if I've tried a few times to reach them, I usually find myself expressing concern, not overly so, but just to sort of say, I hope everything's okay there, especially when they have generally been responsive. And rather than going to that place of, oh, what's going on with them now, or getting
what
annoyed.
Did I do? Yeah.
Right. What did I do? Why are they rejecting me now? Or, it's easy to want to allow those thoughts to enter your mind. But I agree with you. I think probably 9.8 times out of 10, it has, nothing to do with you, if not 10 times out of 10. And it's more about whatever's going on with them, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise, but something else is keeping their attention and they're just not available. And, it's hard though. I can understand why some people have difficulty with that, but especially in the sales field, you've got to have ways of really managing those kinds of dynamics in order to stay positive and keep moving forward, right?
I think about when I can get a meeting. I feel like everyone jokes, like my skill set is I can get a meeting with anyone. I mean, and I know that this is wild, but I feel like if I wanted an audience with Michelle Obama, I could figure out a way to make it happen. I would have to, connect all the dots, but like, I feel like I could get to some of these people. But the way that I have noticed, especially in sales roles, when you're trying to get to the high level decision maker, and I think that this applies to interviews, it applies to any type of person of influence that you're trying to connect with. Do try really hard to find ways to add value before I'm making any type of ask. So if I'm asking for a meeting, if I'm asking for a phone call, I will try to find different ways to add value. And in my opinion, the biggest and most valuable way that you can add value to another person is to help build their business or help build their own personal network, whatever that may be. So I find creative ways to reach out where it's, if I'm trying to get a meeting with Tammy, hey, Tammy, hope this email finds you well. I read this article the other day that mentioned, something that you speak on. Here's this. Or I would work with architects in a lot of my sales positions. Architects necessarily don't purchase my products, so they didn't always need me. So I would have to find ways to add value to them. And usually it would be this potential client who's an end user who's building an office in LA, wants to see an installation somewhere. I know you, Mr. Architect, do all of their projects. I would love to bring them by your office to show it. And then all of a sudden, this person who's ignored me for 4 years is writing back right away, getting me a conference room in their office. Or, I find if you can volunteer for professional organizations like nonprofits or industry specific organizations, I would get myself on the board of directors. So you're networking with other vendors so that they can help you get to that person. But also if you're doing an event that has nothing to do with me trying to sell you something, it's a lot easier. Hey, we're doing a panel on the top hospitality firms in Los Angeles. I'd love for you to be a panelist. Now, all of a sudden, the person that's ignored me for 4 years, different person, is answering my email because I'm helping build their business. And so now I have this like deposit in their emotional bank account. So when it comes time that I need the favor, whether it's the meeting, the introduction, understanding where the project sits, I can cash in on the favor because I've added enough deposits in their bank account. So it's a little transactional way to look at it, but I think it helps break it down to be a little bit more tactical on can you add value? And it could be little things like I would cold call firms. And I think this could be a similar application in like an interview environment. You need to really practice your listening skills because people are giving you clues all over the place. And if you are listening and not just focusing on your intro and your speech and your elevator pitch, you can grab those little nuggets. And one example I love to share, I cold called a firm, walked in, they said, oh, we'd love to have you present, but our calendar is booked out for a year. I said, okay, well, shoot, that's too bad. I will email you our agenda and I will see you guys in a year. And she said, okay, great. It might be a week before I get back to you. I'm going to be out of the office next week. I said, oh, where are you going? Anywhere fun? She goes, oh, I'm going on vacation with my husband for the first time. We're going to Hawaii. And so I get home, I send the spiel for my presentation, and then I send a separate email. I said, hey, enjoy Hawaii. Here's 2 books I read recently, Molokai and Honolulu by Alan, I forget his last name, Alan B. Last name starts with a B. I really enjoyed him. I think you would too. Wouldn't you know, I got an email back right away and I was on the calendar 2 months from now instead of 12 months. And it's just these little like free things that cost you nothing. It just is like an ounce of thoughtfulness to differentiate yourself and start to fill their bank account. So that has always served me very well in any type of role. If you're connecting other people, like just how can you add value? I'm always thinking, how can I add value to this other person?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think, and it comes from a place of sincerity on your part, And even though, it might be that you're approaching someone who, you say has ignored you for 4 years, you could also say that the other way of framing that is their attention just wasn't caught for 4 years, it'd be easy to say, well, oh, you had to do something extra nice for them to be polite to you. But I think there's other ways to really think about that. A lot of people, we're all inundated, right, with messages, and people reach out all the time. And so if you really want to capture someone's attention, you have to give them something that means something to them, right? And I would imagine that there are times where you do make the effort to do something like that, and they still don't get back to you.
Yeah.
That's okay too. I mean, maybe eventually they do. But, at least you did something nice for someone.
And that's at the end of the day, it has never let me down I would get comments like, you just keep giving away all the goodies. It's like, yeah, but when I need the favor, I can cash in the favor, and the favor is usually closing a really large project. So that's how, from a sales perspective, I think some of these like softer skills, like listening, empathy, connecting, I feel like they're kind of dissolving a little bit in priority, especially coming out of the pandemic. Our normal ways of connection have changed. All of the multiple generations in the workforce, like it's a skill that people are rusty at. And so that's what I'm really trying to harness and capture, is this relationship side, this business development side, versus kind of pushing our own agenda and our own products.
Yeah. It reminds me too of what I talk with people about when they're trying to develop new relationships, and make new connections. And that is, you really always need to be interested, not interesting. Right. And so by showing an interest in someone else, getting to know them, it gives you that opportunity also to add value. And they'll see from your behavior, that gives them information about who you are and what you're like to work with and what kind of person you are. And people really appreciate and want to work with somebody who behaves that way. And then they're more open to hearing about what it is that you're bringing to them, whether it's to sell a product or a service or whatever it is, or if you're, looking for an opportunity to speak with someone for networking or looking for a job, whatever it is, people are going to be more open to that because they have a better sense of who you are and how you operate in that way.
I agree. And I think that brings up a really important point too, is that this concept of authenticity is really important. Like I talk about my grandparents all the time. They have both since passed away, but all of my colleagues, all of my customers, they knew about my grandparents because I would talk about them, because I would go visit them or see them or help them. Or my grandpa had an avocado tree, so I'd bring avocados to my customers all the time.
Nice.
And it just, it was lucky for me, it was free, but I'd ship them to colleagues. I'd bring them on business trips and like give people avocados because it was free. And I'd usually show them a picture of my grandparents. Like were so important to me.
Yeah.
And then people realize like, okay, this is someone who's a good person, and they're honest and they're being their authentic self. And like, that's the type of people we gravitate towards.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. That's great. That's great. So you were with Atlas Hardware when you started. Take us a little bit forward from there in terms of your trajectory and what kinds of things you grew into. It sounds like it was a sort of a natural pathway.
It was great. I actually stepped into my first director of sales job. I think I was 27 and I just liked it and I was good at it, and our reps loved me, and we were really creative with how we would go to market. And so I was able to build a lot of sales channels that didn't exist before, because I could listen to people and understand their business needs and then find a solution that fit their needs. I was then recruited to a company called EcoSmart Fire, and they made is an Australian company that we were the US distributor for it, based in LA. And there I met one of my most influential mentors. He's a man named Jamie Heil. Jamie taught me so much about how to sell in a way that was focused on program versus product, how to handle objections, how to speak to business models. He's the one who kind of taught me the concept of the emotional bank account and gave me that language. So I learned so much from Jamie. And I did, in that role, I was our national sales manager for commercial and hospitality projects. So hired a rep team, built out a rep team, and we would sell fire features and fire pits to commercial buildings. And one of the best examples I have when I talk about selling to business model versus product feature, we had fire pits, right? So fire pit, how much does it cost? What's it made out of? How hot does it get? How much does the fuel cost? Like all of these questions, you'd get stuck in this like ring around the rosy of answering questions. And what I learned from Jamie, and now what I've really kind of mastered in my approach is, Mr. Hotel owner, this fire pit is going to make you money because now you have this marketable amenity feature on your property. It's going to attract guests to stay at your space. And, I'm a single traveler. I want to have an opportunity to go meet other people, or you give this opportunity to gather around the fire pit. The fuel cost is going to pay for itself in the first round of drinks. This is going to increase your food and beverage revenue. Like you find all of these ways to take the product features, but how does it impact the customer's business? And I have really found a way to master that. And I can sell the most technical stuff, and I don't need to be an expert at I don't need to be an engineer because I know how to speak to business model and ask the right questions. And that has been something that I really learned there. And then fire was tough because owners were just, I'd spend 2 years on a commercial project, and then at the 11th hour, they'd say, we don't want the liability. So it was getting a little for me to just have these great opportunities. So I was recruited by a company called Lutron Electronics based in Pennsylvania. Lutron is a very well-established company that invented the dimmer 60 plus years ago.
Wow.
So with the Lutron team, I was on the LA team for 4 years, and then the past 2, prior to starting my consulting firm, I managed our North America hospitality business. And taking the same type of strategies on Mr. Hotel Owner, this is how the product's going to improve your staff experience, improve your guest experience, make you money. So that kind of reframe has always served me. And I just got to a point where I loved every company that I've worked for, but I really feel this call to teach other people that they can be their authentic selves. They don't have to be a version of themselves that they think their bosses or their colleagues or their company or their customers need to be. Like, you can be your real self, obviously professional within reason, but you can be your true authentic self, and then focus on relationship versus product. And so that's kind of where I got to this point where I could see this is missing in the industry. Some of these skills and teachings don't exist. And I want to be the one that brings it to market and talks about it and makes people empowered to leverage their relationship building skills, learn how to do it, and do it while embracing their authentic selves.
Wow. I love the way all of that just rolled right off your tongue, the way you express that, because it's clear that you really believe, what you're saying. And I mean, but it makes perfect sense. So I'm sure it was a big decision to, hang up your own shingle and everything.
It's so funny because when I read Work from the Inside Out, I have always followed my heart, always. And it's I have to kind of hide some of it. But when Lutron was recruiting me, all of my horoscopes leading up to my interview were like, take this job. And when I got the offer, my mom said, it's like the universe is turning your shoulders and pushing you in this direction. And so, I mean, it's kind of silly, but when I started to think about, I actually read a book that you reference in your book, in the resources at the back, Designing Your Life by Dave Evans and Bill Burnett, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. During the pandemic, LA was on a really strict lockdown, and I took that time to really go inside and focus. I hired a personal trainer on Zoom. I started adding fitness into my lifestyle, which was something that was missing. And you're supposed to exercise, but like, who has the time? So I prioritized exercise, and I got really into meditation. One of my customers lost her job during the pandemic, and she created a meditation group. So 24 weeks, every Wednesday, me and these 6 other people would meditate together for 30 minutes. And I'm actually meeting one of them tonight who we've never met before. We're going to dinner.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. So I got really into meditating. I got really into journaling and just making sure I was expressing gratitude for my health and other things. Because it could have been a very dark time. You're just working nonstop and then alone in your house. So I used that time to really work on some of my internal strength. And I read that book, Designing Your Life. And in it, there's a section where it talks about where are you energized, where are you engaged, and where are you in flow? And I've been sitting with it for a while. How could I build a business where I'm energized, I'm engaged, and I'm in flow? Because I could always talk about the technical stuff, but it wasn't my passion. And now I'm building a business where I get to meet people like yourselves. I get to read business books and interview the authors. I mean, I get to really leap into this next chapter. And it's been so nice because I really am leaning on my network to support me, to help lift me, to introduce me, to hire me.
Right.
And I'm leaning on them hard and they are coming through. And it's been so cool.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it's a big, it's always a big shift going from being part of an organization, but I can imagine, being in a sales role and in an industry that was serving hospitality during the pandemic, I can only imagine how difficult that was. And I love the fact that you refocused yourself on yourself in that way. And you use that time to make some other decisions and found some really great ways to do that. It sounds like you made a whole bunch of really great decisions along the way.
It was nice. And when I resigned, it was really tough because it was like breaking up with hundreds of people. I feel like I went through 100 breakups, but everyone knew me at that point. They knew where my strengths are. And when people found out what I left to go build, like, oh, that totally makes sense for her. And all of these people are showing up out of the woodwork. How can I help you? How can I help you? And I think one thing that surprised me when I left, I was very much, it was a celebration. I had, we had a huge lunch. Actually, my 1-year anniversary is tomorrow, June 17th.
Wow.
We had a really big lunch. My colleagues brought me flowers and gifts and like nice pens. Like I just had the nicest send off. My mom and dad came. They were in LA, so they came, and it was so lovely. And I really feel like you hear all these other, I'm a single woman and I've been 1,000 baby showers and 1,000 weddings and bachelorette parties and all of these celebrations of other life milestones. And I was really nicely celebrated when I started the business. So it was a positive story that I want to make sure is out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely. So if people want to learn more about what you're offering and might want to get in touch, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, my website's pretty easy. It's saramurray.com. That's SARAMURRAY. And Sara Murray is the opposite of your name, Tammy. There are thousands and thousands of Sara Murrays on the internet. And before the pandemic, like years ago, I looked at the URL and it was like $3,700. It was so expensive. And so then one day, mid-pandemic, I was just kind of bored and I looked and it was for sale for $300. So I snatched the URL.
I was going to say,
like the only person, I don't have Sara Murray anything. You always have to make, 1,000 letters and numbers after it. But so saramurray.com. And we do have the podcast Prospecting on Purpose has been really fun. There's a lot of really tactical skills and techniques and wonderful guests. I'm so excited to feature you on the show as well. But the podcast has been a really nice resource. And then for the most part, I work with sales teams and sales leaders to help go through how can we reframe the art of relationship building and how can we really focus on speaking to a customer's business model as opposed to kind of pushing our own agenda. So I will work with sales leaders and their teams to workshop that and kind of finesse our messaging on how we go to market and how we prospect and build new business.
Yeah. That's great. And I would imagine too, though, that anybody who's looking for what's next for them could learn from a lot of the way that you're framing a lot of these things. So you've made a number of transitions from one company to the next. And of course, this most recent, very dramatic transition. What would be a key piece of advice that you might give someone who is thinking about making their next move?
I think a lot of your message of work from the inside out, I have had to really learn how to trust myself and trust my intuition and not do I call it validation seeking, where you go and ask 10 people for their opinions, because all you're doing is diluting your own opinion. So I have really had to learn how to trust myself and listen to my intuition. And when I do something that's against my intuition and I am proven right or wrong, I guess, how do you word that? When what I feared would happen did happen, I just look at that as another data point. Like, okay, you didn't need to do that. You should have trusted your intuition. So I think getting really clear on your relationship with yourself, however that is. And for me, journaling is very helpful for me. And so is meditation, because it helps kind of clear out all the muck. You have a million thoughts running in your head. And if you can get still and get the thoughts out of your head, the answer usually finds you. So I think just making sure you're working on your relationship with yourself and giving yourself what you need. And that might be boundaries with people that aren't serving you. It might be going on a walk and calling your mom, find what you need and prioritize it. Because you're going to need the strength if you take the big change, and it's going to have to come from yourself.
Yeah. Great advice. Well, Sara, this has been a wonderful conversation. Lots of great lessons that you've taught us that I think will help a lot of listeners. I want to thank you for being here today. Thank you for having me on your show also. And I can't wait to put this episode out there. It's going to help a lot of people.
Thank you for having me, Tammy. It's been so lovely to be in each other's orbits. And I love networking because it leads me to people like you. So thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Sara Murray. It was so interesting to speak with her and learn about her earlier life, various transitions, and her current work today. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygoolerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 227. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out. Break through 9 common obstacles and design a career that fulfills you. It's available through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or you can request it through your local public library. If you were inspired by this episode with Sara, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and please do subscribe so you don't miss our next show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? Oh, I would so love to read your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find. Go to my website, tammygoolerloeb.com/podcast. Click on the Apple Podcast button and follow the instructions provided there. You can also help support this podcast by buying me a cup of coffee. Go to buymeacoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is self-funded, I would so appreciate your support. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I would love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.